Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore. It's time for another whiskey tasting today, and a name that most of you will know. So I'm going to give you a little background on this whiskey and then do a tasting for you. And if you get value out of this video, please like the video, if you will, and subscribe for more of these types of videos, and ring the bell if you want to be notified whenever there is a new whiskey tasting or a new interview. Okay, Maker's Mark is something that you're probably very familiar with. You have probably seen it on your shelf. Even if you are not a whiskey person, you've probably seen this iconic red wax drip down the side of this very uniquely shaped bottle. Margie Samuels, back in the 50s, came up with this design because she really liked the classiness of French cognac bottles, and so she wanted to do something that was similar to kind of elevate bourbon, which at that time was seen as an old man's drink and probably not something that was seen as classy, but more as something that you just drank to get the job done. And so here she is elevating the bottle with this. I will tell you that you will not see dripped wax on other bottles, and if you do, it's only because Maker's Mark hasn't come after them yet, because they are very passionate about making sure that this trademark stays with them. And the only other bottle that I've seen is Knob Creek, which does a black wax. It doesn't really do the drips on it. And the reason they probably get away with that is because they are owned by the same company, Beam Suntory. So Maker's Mark has a very interesting history, a very interesting mash bill. They were one of the first really widely popular wheated whiskeys when I got started on drinking bourbon. And in fact, when I was asking around what is a good starter bourbon, when I was wanting to investigate for the first time, I was told, get a bottle of Maker's Mark. It's very drinkable. It's a nice whiskey. It's something that will help get your foot in the door because it's not an overly aggressive bourbon. So the reason that it's not an overly aggressive bourbon was on purpose. Bill Samuels Sr., back in the 1950s, was kind of sitting around, didn't have anything to do. He was driving his wife Marge crazy. And so she said, you got to do something. And so he thought, well, you know what, I'm sort of retired here off the family fortune from T.W. Samuels, which was his family's whiskey business, but they had shut down. And he thought, well, I could get back into the whiskey business, but I need a distillery. So they went out and they found the Burke Springs Distillery, which is a historic building that, or historic distillery that is said to be, Guinness has the Guinness Book of World Records has pointed out that is the oldest bourbon whiskey distillery in the world. They've checked the records and everything. I don't know. I'm still kind of iffy on that, because you could say Old Oscar Pepper, you could say Buffalo Trace. To me, it comes down to when did they actually start distilling whiskey at the Burke Springs grist mill, because that's what was there when they have their appointed date back in the first decade of the 1800s. So anyway, this is the hard part about whiskey history, is it's hard to have a definite first on a lot of things because records just weren't really well kept back then. Anyway, Bill comes up with the old recipe from T.W. Samuels, and he said, I don't really want to do this because I want to make something that is drinkable and different from everything else. And everything else had a mash bill of corn, malted barley, and rye. And his opinion was that rye was too aggressive. So he wanted something softer. So rather than making a bunch of whiskey to try to figure out with different mash bills what worked, he had his wife Margie bake bread with different types of grain, and the one they landed on was red winter wheat. And so the mash bill for this particular whiskey is very interesting. It comes in at 70% corn, 16% red winter wheat, so it's actually a high wheat content, and 14% malted barley. So with a reduced amount of corn, and then with malted barley and wheat really kind of making up a good portion of this mash bill, what that does is it's going to soften the whiskey. How soft is it? Is it too soft? Well, that's a good question. And this is one, like I say, when I first started drinking whiskey and got into drinking bourbon, it was a good starter. I thought it was fine. Sometimes, though, you think of starters as something that you're never going to go back to once you've developed a palate. So is there still a place on my shelf for Maker's Mark? And so what's interesting about this whiskey, when I first put it to my nose, the caramel's right out front. I mean, that's definitely something you're going to note. And there is a good bit of toasted oak coming in on the nose as well. But there's a little spicy character to it that would, if I didn't know that this didn't have rye in it, I might think that there was a little touch of rye in this, because it's almost got like a little herbally character. But it's definitely the oak and the caramel that take the lead. I get a hint of cherry in there, just a hint, but that's it. So it's a good nose. Let's go ahead and go in for a sip of it. Cheers. Nice mouthfeel to it. Kind of a creamy texture to it. It's not overly heavy, but it feels nice on the palate. It's definitely got a grain. I get a cross between like a hazelnut and then this really nice grain flavor that comes in. A grain flavor that I sometimes associate more with barley than I do with wheat. So if I'm having a single malt, I tend to get this kind of a flavor. Wheat, as I understand it, really kind of needs to work with the barrel. It's the opposite of rye. Rye, the more it's in the barrel, the weaker it gets. Wheat seems to hit its stride over a period of time, and that's why when you look at some of the whiskeys like Weller or Pappy Van Winkle, those are wheated bourbons that go long in the barrel, and they can survive a lot longer in the barrel and do quite well for themselves. An interesting connection to Pappy Van Winkle and Maker's Mark is that the day that Bill decided he wasn't going to use the old family rye recipe, he called his friends over. They're all sitting there in the family room of his home, and one of those friends was Pappy Van Winkle, who his whiskey was Weller, which was a wheated bourbon. And so he showed them the recipe. He ripped it up. No, he didn't rip it up, actually. He set it on fire. And that was it. Threw in a trash can. It's done. We're not doing that recipe anymore. We need to come up with something new. And you got Pappy Van Winkle standing over here. So wheated is probably the direction that you're going to go in. So, no, nice whiskey. I'm going to go in for another taste. More of that kind of jelly bean cherry comes in on that, along with the grain. It is a very interesting whiskey. There is a pepperiness that comes in, so that spice is still there. You get a little bit of a Kentucky hug out of it, so it's not soft. It is going to give you a little bit of that reaction that you might expect out of a rye forward bourbon, but it tastes really nice. And actually, this is one of those whiskeys that goes down for me as when you're at a party you're hanging out with people, you want to have a whiskey in your hand that tastes good, but isn't going to get in the way of your conversation, and it's going to go down easy. I think Maker's Mark is the whiskey for that. If you're just starting out, I think that's great advice to also jump in on Maker's Mark. First of all, it looks nice on your shelf, and second of all, it's a whiskey that's not going to offend anybody. It actually is one that you could probably give to somebody who isn't necessarily a whiskey drinker, and they won't be down on the floor, coughing and gagging because it's like, oh, this is too strong for me. I mean, it's proofed up enough. It's around 45% alcohol by volume, so it's substantial enough. It's right in the sweet spot for bourbon. So anyway, for me, it's a good whiskey, and it's one of those that I don't mind having a bottle around. And it's good to have a bottle around too, just in case you have friends that come over who they really only know Maker's Mark, and so there you go, you got something for them to drink. It's kind of like when I have friends come over, and I'm not really a soft drink drinker, but if I know the person that's coming over drinks soft drinks, then I'll have a Coke or a Pepsi or something in the refrigerator for them just in case. And of course, they'll end up not drinking it, and I'll be stuck with this unopened bottle of Coke or Pepsi because they're thinking, well, he doesn't drink soft drinks, so I'm not going to ask for one. At least if you're left with a bottle of Maker's Mark, you got something interesting to drink on your own. So hope you enjoyed that run through on Maker's Mark, and more videos on the way. Until next time, cheers and Slán Java.